Good day, everyone. Welcome to my living room. My name is Ivor McGettigan, and on behalf of the Altamimi Education Sector Group, you are all very welcome to this webinar today. We have a fantastic audience from across the entire MENA region and also further afield. Special call out to George Dubakey in the United States, who has got up in the middle of the night to watch this. So you really got to make this special for George. So welcome. Today we're gathered to discuss a very interesting topic, beyond COVID-19, lessons learned from the crisis and lasting changes for the K-12 sector in the Middle East. And the emphasis is very much on the long-term impact, and a lot of people would argue that COVID-19 has merely been a catalyst for change that was already going to come down the line. So we look forward to that conversation with a stellar panel who I shall introduce to you very shortly. Just quick housekeeping matter. Questions are very much welcome, and on the webinar platform there's a functionality to send in a question, and in the last 15 minutes we'll get to those questions and go through as many of them as we possibly can. So we do encourage people to participate and ask questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our panel. We have Raza Khan, CEO of Al Naja Education, one of the fastest growing education groups in the Middle East. Raza has also got a keen interest in entrepreneurship and disruption, and is a good contributor on that topic. We also have Mick Gernon. He's the Chief Innovation Officer at GEMS and instrumental in their Centres of Excellence, which is also a disruptive model for K-12 education. We also have Mark Ryder, CEO and founder of Daymar Consultancy, a consultancy that helps advising in the education space, both investors, landowners, and operators in the market. He's former director of real estate at GEMS. And Cody Claver, general manager of iAcademy Middle East, a KHDA approved American online school. So welcome to our panel. And first question, Raza, can I ask you,
sure,
how is K-12 coping with the crisis currently, do you think?
Sorry, could you say that again, Ivor? I missed the start.
Sorry, Raza. How is K-12 sector currently coping with the crisis, in your opinion?
Okay, let me kind of I'll take a kind of expanding view, if you like. I'll start with my own group, which I know very well. I'll zoom out a little to the regional response in GCC, and then also a little bit about what I pick up through my international networks. We're very fortunate within Naja that we have, a presence both in the GCC and in Southeast Asia and have a comparative experience. My own background is, between both GCC and UK, so I can give a European perspective as well. Look, I think the one thing, and although many parents who found it difficult to cope with the initial launch of e-learning may not agree, the one thing I would say is I think we should really commend the education sector as a whole for the speed of response to the lockdown. I've not seen an industry have to pivot so fast and still maintain such a continuity of service to its paying customers. It's astonishing, and hopefully will change some of the perceptions that people outside of our industry hold, that education is a very conservative sector, that teachers are kind of stubborn and don't change their practice, et cetera, et cetera. Look, we've always had innovators, the very big groups like GEMS who are represented here today, the very disruptive entrepreneurs of online education like iAcademy and people like Cody. And then in the middle, you have the people like us who are mainstream school operators. And I think even the mainstream operators, government and private sector, pivoted very fast. I think what's then happened is the whole sector has gone into a rapid mode of new learning. It's fair to say the quality of the learning experience for children now is qualitatively and exponentially better than what it was at the start. At the start, we had great technology, but a global community of teachers who weren't used to using that technology to its best potential. This has been like a intensive CPD for the world to learn how to make use of e-learning product. So I'd say at a global picture, we've seen a good response from the teaching community. And I think we've seen parents also go through a very commendable speed of learning themselves and become better at being the co-educator or the co-facilitator with the child, without it necessarily taking up their whole day. Now, I think in the GCC, because of the very high concentration of the private sector schools here, of course, looking at a global comparison, I think the GCC, in particular Dubai, has really led the way in a very speedy response. I guess that's driven by market realities. We have to keep our customers happy, because if they don't pay their fees, we don't eat. But that economic imperative has really driven creativity, in the teaching community. And I think the GCC, because of the high percentage of private education, has really become the world leader in responses to e-learning, and much more so than I see in mature school sectors like the US and the UK, where we've seen the much larger education market take longer to respond. Usually we look up to our bigger, more mature neighbours, but I think this is one example where the GCC really led the world in the response to e-learning.
Interesting. Thanks, Raza. Cody, can I ask you to give your perspective and maybe to explain a little bit about your school model, because it won't be familiar perhaps to other audience.
Yeah, so thanks. We're a full-time K through 12 American curriculum online school. So we really do operate just as normally as any school would, just without the brick and mortar. And so we're able to scale up at a much different rate than say a traditional school. With that, we also don't have some of the trappings that a school would have in terms of facilities and those kinds of costs and maintenance and upkeep. And so, that allows us to be a lot more nimble in the market to meet the needs of parents. And so we can, we just as an example, in this third trimester here, when parents were kind of engaged in the online learning piece, and they were deciding whether or not they were going to stay in their brick and mortar school or did they want to look for something else. We saw a dramatic rise in interest in what we do, and parents coming in and making that transfer to the full-time online. From my perspective, I think the schools in general have responded really quite well. There is, I would agree with what Roz has said there, and that the ingenuity that's happened with schools and with educators. I don't think we've ever seen anybody have to do this in such a quick turnaround. So quite impressive. It goes to show that there's a lot of dedicated teachers out there that are spending a lot of time and energy and effort, and clearly they love their profession, and they obviously love their kids, and that's I think that's an important piece to what we're looking at here. And when schools and when I think when there's an ethos of that in a school, I know in what we do, that's paramount. We're totally customer service oriented, because we have to be. We have to meet the needs, and you're seeing that same kind of philosophy come through, in the brick and mortar schools as well, because, it's got to be high touch these days. Anyway, hope that helps.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's been really helpful. Mick, if I can come to you and give your opinion on a very broad question, if you forgive me, but how do you think K-12 in the Middle East can come out of this stronger on a permanent basis, post COVID-19? What do you think? What changes will stick? What won't? And looking to the future, what's it going to look like in 2023?
Okay, it's a great question. I think that the opportunities that we now have are immense, and I know it's bad news in a way that it's taken a pandemic to get us to this point where potentially we should be rethinking what the whole education system is actually about. And I just want to start just by echoing what Raza and Cody have said as well. Significant shift already in terms of mindsets, in terms of attitudes from teachers, from parents and from students in terms of embracing something that lots of people now call the new norm, but we've not yet defined what that new norm will actually be. So I think for now, there are probably two stages of this. There's one that says, how do we continue to learn from the period of time that we've had within this term 3? You know, what's gone well, what's not gone well, how do we need to continue to improve? And actually, if we focus that more on the pedagogical aspects, so what's different around how teachers have delivered, what's different around how students are learning, and what should stay, and maybe what should be put aside, I think that's one starting point. But I suppose that once you get into that type of discussion, if you're looking at that particular segment, there's almost like a knock-on effect that you have to consider for all other aspects. So if we started with, let's look at what learning should look like in the future, that will have an automatic knock-on effect to what does our workforce look like? What do we expect from them? What does our organization then look like in terms of how we structure ourselves? Is it still a traditional school model? Do we still have monolithic buildings where we put loads and loads of students into all the time and look after them? There's a great phrase that someone once used that actually said schools are like warehouses for children. It's just that modern day schools do them better because they're in more modern settings. And I think that holds true. And that's one of the things that we've really got to begin to grasp on this one, around do we actually keep schools in the way that they're organised, in the way that they're structured, exactly the same. But if you change that, then you're then into that other thing that says, well, okay, well, what should a school do? Yeah, and should it be more around the socialisation piece and more around the community hub, rather than just a place where everyone goes to almost like impart and receive knowledge? That takes a seismic shift, I think, in terms of our thinking as a system, as well as sort of individual schools and individual group operators. But you could go around full circle. You know, it touches on the types of technologies that we would need to employ, the types of assessments that we'd actually need to see in place, and those sort of workforce changes that we'd want to see to actually begin to make that real difference. So I think the scope is certainly there for us to change. I think there is a willingness to embrace, and maybe that willingness is at different levels, according to readiness, according to maturity, according to technology stack, according to then I suppose opinions of teachers and the mindset of teachers. So it is there, and as Raza said, I think that the UAE has got a real part to play here in leading. That if we want to be seen as the centre of innovation, education, and forgive me for saying this, has been one of those, the last bastion of real, genuine change that we've actually seen. Now this gives us a real opportunity to redefine and really for the UAE to lead the world. And in order to do that, I would say, and if I'm being slightly controversial here, I do apologise, but we should move away from traditional models. We should move away from a short-term fix and putting a sticking plaster on something to genuine change that starts right at the core of what education is about, and then what the implications are going to be wrapped all around that.
Thank you, Mick. And maybe if I bring in Raza on some of that, there's a lot of content there to assimilate. Thank you, Mick, for that. But one of the topics that Mick brought up, and it's important, I think, is the sort of pastoral experience, the student-centric approach of schools. Raz, I know that's an issue close to your heart. Would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, very, very much so. And also, I'm the person who made the point about school being, I'm the guy who getting quoted as saying schools play an important warehousing function. And actually, I'll qualify that by, it actually addresses your point on pastoral. You see, schools serve three primary purposes in society, and we need to be very mindful of our responsibilities to do the best we can across all three dimensions. We have to educate the children and give them, the cognitive skills and the subject knowledge and understanding to apply themselves in the world. The second thing we have to do is give the children the social experiences that allow them to engage with the world as a mature and balanced person, right? So the socialization, the interaction, the engagement in creative pursuits, the engagement in sporting activity is equally an important function that schools play as the role as an educator itself. The third very important function we need to do is we need to create a place where children can go during the day so that the economy can function and so adults can work. You know, and I think we need to be very realistic about that, because I see a new reality in which we fundamentally change the model of what happens in a school. But personally, I remain very wedded to the idea that the central location, the hub of all of that, will be a physical school location, because I need some way to bring children physically together. I need some way to allow the magic and the kind of synchronicity and the you know, the unexpectedness of human interaction to flourish, which means I also need a certain critical mass of children to be together. And I need to give the parents sufficient coverage of service that they can actually sustain themselves economically by going out and earning a living and working. And we see, you know, I think we'll see two big trends. We see an increasing requirement among parents for flexibility. So the same school will need to accommodate some children who want to come to school 5 days a week, and some children who want to come to school 3 days a week, because they might be physically distant from the school environment. And I need to find a way to teach a mixed class of attendees who are both at school all day, or their classmates are also only at school for part of the week. I'm also hearing from more and more customers globally that what they've learned out of this lockdown is they don't want more school, they don't want less school, but more. They, you know, the biggest thing people have missed is their children being in a social setting with other children, and more the world is requiring children actually to be taken care of in school for a longer day. So the other flexibility I need to build into my system is somehow, how do I leverage technology to extend the school day so that children, as they get older and can cope with a longer day, can actually be organized and facilitated and empowered in a school setting to do their best over a much longer school day. For me, the future school still has a physical hub in a bricks and mortar building. It has way more integration of e-learning and remote learning into its curriculum so that I can teach a much wider range of subjects. Someone like Cody can leverage the world's resourcing and talent pool of teachers to allow a traditional operator like me to bring new subjects into my curriculum. And, you know, I want to give that choice to my parents, but I might not have, you know, 30 children who want to learn Mandarin to justify running a full-time teacher. I think we'll see children with much more variable attendance patterns, you know, and I think the schools need to be built to flexible building designs that allow that, and be overlaid with a lot of technology to allow them to deliver through the same school a different experience for each child.
Thanks, Raza. And Mark, can you maybe take up, Raza raised an interesting point about reimagining the relationship between perhaps a school physical building, the online, offline education, the wider community, the parents, perhaps. You know, particularly colleges in Dubai, we have school campuses that cost 100 million dirhams and north of that to build in the first place. And to use the PE term, leveraging and sweating the asset and getting the most that we can out of it. But it seems that this is an opportunity to revisit some of these orthodox uses of buildings and what, if you were starting a new school tomorrow, it might look entirely different to the campuses that we've seen before.
No, I think that's a very good point. And first of all, thank you for Ivor and Altamimi for setting this up. And hello, everyone, and thanks for the excellent words that have been spoken already. I mean, look, what I will do in answering that question is also pull back a little bit, because you set a question that is, can the Middle East come out stronger from this experience? And I think we've already heard from the other three panelists a lot of really excellent ways that it can. But in doing that, I think really important for us to remember that things weren't really where they should have been, certainly in the UAE. And this is all about the UAE leading, as we said earlier, and then markets like Saudi and others need to learn the lessons of this rampant growth that we've seen in the last 10 years or so in the UAE, particularly Dubai. And we need to make sure that other markets learn from that. And I think part of it is what Raza was saying there about buildings. But I think before we get onto that, I want to say that, you know, value for money and choice have become words that parents now use all the time. And good operators that we've got represented today know that people will critically assess how they spend their money. You know, one of the things that has come out of this period is that people are now really looking at what they're getting for their money. So a lot of what Raza has just said is absolutely right. And so we as an industry have to respond to that with the way in which we locate schools within communities. We are mindful of that school building being a hub in the community. But I think we will also see that because things weren't as they should have been, there is a period of pain to come. You know, I think there's a period of recalibration. And I, for one, are very involved in this because, you know, I have made it my business since leaving GEMS 5 years ago to try to help operators make sure they strike the right deals on land, you know, with the right buildings. And the truth is that right now, a lot of the models are broken, you know, and they're broken for reasons that were relevant at the time. But now we have got to rethink the way we're delivering education. We really do have to look at new ways of creating a partnership between the landowners who should benefit from a great school being at the heart of the community. But they have to benefit in a way that I'm starting to see more revenue sharing rent models, for example, coming in. We didn't used to have those a few years ago. You know, it was always, well, you know, you the school, this is a fixed rent, and you know, you take the gamble, you take the risk of filling up the school, and times were good when you could fill the school rapidly, but that's not now the case. And I think when you also have to look at new ways of putting the child at the centre of the education, inevitably the relationship between the landowner, the building owner, and the school will have to change. And we are seeing that tension already during this dreadful period. But I think what we all want to focus on is what happens after we get through this. We're in the new norm. And, you know, I do think you will see different relationships being struck. There's going to be a lot of restructuring, personally, you know, in the short term. But then in terms of, you know, this question is all about the wider Middle East. And I think we're going to see new models being put in on day one in other parts in the Middle East, which learn from the experience we've had here in Dubai.
And Ivor, just to jump in here, you know, talking about new models and new partnerships and things like that, you know, we're in negotiations and discussions right now, and even doing some consultation with schools and school groups that are you know, doing just what Mark said, you know, looking at that, and I'm hearing, you know, as much as parents, Raza, you say they want more school, and I think there's truth in that. I think what they also want is they're seeing that that flexibility is such a key now, and that not everything that, you know, a brick and mortar school does has always fit my needs, and now they see that there is the ability to, you know, mold and make it to what works for me. And so you're going to see, I think, a lot more of the consumer, you know, making demands on the system.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks, Cody. Like, if I can come to you on sort of the topic of the stratification of education, you know, so we have these clear boundaries between kindergarten, school, university, and been there since time immemorial, since 1066, Mick, these divisions have been there. But one of the things that I like about what you're doing is you're disrupting that, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. But I'm also interested to hear your thoughts on the trajectory of this. Are more schools going to do this? Do you think this is the way things are going to be as part of the new world order, shall we say?
Yeah, and thank you for your comment. We're only on sort of trial phase, please, but we'll see. But just to pick up Raza and Cody's point and Mark's around flexibility, and that I think is all of us moving forward, irrespective of whatever else comes out of this. So I don't think that we want that will happen. I think we are available for people. We're all in the business of providing ranges, different audiences and customers, etc. So I think the flexibility in the system and the flexibility for us as operators is absolutely central. I think in terms of the stratification, as you say, we've not held a view that everyone has to go to school till they're 18 and then set a series of tests and examinations that then determine what your next step will be, and then you then go to university. And you probably spend the first year of university redoing things that you've done as a 17 and 18-year-old, then you go on and you start the whole cycle again by going into employment at 22, 23, or whatever it needs to be. We looked at options now to say, how can we blur those boundaries? And do they have to stay as age-based boundaries? Or should we genuinely now be looking at positions where, why can't you go to university, for example, when you're 15? If you're able enough and can demonstrate sufficient capability, why isn't that an option? Or if you were 18, why can't you go straight into a master's program for 1 year? Why would you have to go through an undergraduate and then a master's program? Or actually, if you wanted to go straight into industry, why can't you do that? And the system sort of doesn't quite prevent us from doing that, but it puts up a lot of barriers for that to actually happen. Part of the models that we're looking at that we've classed as what we call our centres of excellence, and we hope will be a great model for Dubai moving forward, is that we've picked up key sectors of industry. Now, whether they be entrepreneurship, whether they be aviation, whether they be theatre, technologies, whether digital industries, whatever they would be, but said, well, okay, well, what happens if we actually brought undergraduate learning down into a high school program? Or what happens if we actually made the high school program at least 50 or 60% internship in a company, and each of those experiences are then credentialed by either that company or that university, and therefore they provide almost like an automatic access, an entry into that system.
Mike, I think we're having some trouble with your microphone. I'm not sure there's anyone else. Mike, we've just a bit of trouble with the microphone. Maybe we can come back to you. Just losing you a little bit. And maybe I'll just come to Mark in the meantime, Nick, and I'll come back to you on that one, because I would like to discuss it. But Mark, on the thanks for the comments, your candid comments about what's happening out there on the market in relation to the building side of it and land use. Have you any view on campuses and optimization of campuses and what they might look like? So the physical environment keeping up with what's happening and what's likely to happen in the next few years on the online and general space.
Well, okay. I mean, I do see consolidation. I think we all see consolidation in the marketplace. I'm now focusing on the UAE because obviously other markets like Saudi and things, we have the opportunity to build differently from day one. But I think what you will see is that schools, there'll be mergers and acquisitions, and there'll be restructuring, and obviously the asset is an important part of that model. And so, in some cases, of course, there are quite limiting, there are restrictions on what one can do, and I think we are going to have to see a degree of cooperation between the various partners and stakeholders that perhaps we haven't seen to date, particularly in this part of the world. But maybe what we've all been through will actually introduce a degree of a sensible approach to these issues, because we're all in it together. I mean, I think that we've seen a situation over the last few years in particular where land in Dubai for schools has until very recently been speculated on. And groups have passed on packages, schools, and sold on, and values have gone up, and we really have reached very unsustainable positions in many cases where schools really cannot pay the rent. Now, this was when they were full or heading towards being full. So now that we have these new models and new challenges, I do see us having to really rethink the whole economics. Now, part of it is actually making sure that you build schools in the right place. And I'm afraid I might be a bit controversial in what I'm about to say, but it isn't good enough to have a premium school that's premium because it has premium fees. And unfortunately, that's what we've had in Dubai. We've had a lot of schools that have been premium only because of expensive fees. And the same thing goes with the location of the school. Sadly, we have a lot of schools that were built because the funder had the land, not because it was the right place to build a school. So I think you have to actually start by really looking at that across the marketplace. And I think there will be closures. I do. People always say KHDA won't close schools. I think we're in a different world now. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see the schools that are well located with the sorts of things that this panel has talked about put in place as early as possible. I think you'll see they will thrive, but you also will see losers.
Thank you, Mark. Mick, can I go back to you? Because sorry to interrupt you, but we were losing you. Can you speak to us, see how you're getting on there with the sound check?
Yeah, is that any better?
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
Do I come through?
I think I interrupted you when you were just getting into full flow about what you're doing, the centres of excellence. It'd be great to hear a little bit about that and maybe some reflection for the rest of us about how it could shape education.
Yeah. So if I just focus on the centres, we created 5 centres in response to what we think would be future demand and future demand both industry and universities. Each of our 5 centres have university partners. They also have business partners. And the idea behind it is that we blur the edges of traditional age boundaries and examinations and qualifications, and allow for automatic pathways into those universities or into those sort of career pathways with partners. The idea behind it is that it's a range of real-world learning experiences, so deep integration in terms of either the subject matter or the career itself. And we allow those people to credential what that looks like. And therefore, rather than just having to go through your level or your IB or your US diploma, an alternative set of credentials recognised by an international partner that would then allow you access to a particular career or pathway of study. Now, whilst that's not completely new, it is new for the UAE in terms of a way forward. It creates something that someone from the ability to be agile and nimble, rather than just time served and seat time, is probably more pressing over here than anywhere else. Yeah, we're a fast-moving nation, a fast-moving region, and to have the brightest minds coming out of our schools and into those immediately, I think would be a significant benefit. We would like providing those centres remain responsive to what the economy actually wants and needs.
Okay, thank you, Meg. Thank you. And Raza, maybe to bring you in on this, on your opinion in relation to micro accreditation, perhaps, schools running other courses beyond the syllabus and some of these potential new avenues available.
One of the biggest opportunities that new technology, both the end user technology and the access to an almost limitless resource of teachers and materials, online. One of the as yet unexploited but biggest potential areas this can help traditional school operators is exactly through this micro accreditation, micro learning type of a route. Now, Mike's described a great model whereby you have the centers of excellence where children can go onto an alternative pathway. We're also very interested in where we can enhance, for example, our most gifted and talented children by allowing them to take micro accreditation and micro courses outside of their core programs of study. If I'm a gifted and talented student, and let's say I'm doing 3 A levels, in liberal arts type of a field, well, actually, it's also worthwhile for me to engage on the online element of university level study in other subjects as well. It helps me make more informed choices about where I want to do my higher study. So we see for our gifted and talented sixth formers, for example, quite a variable experience here where they're You know, they're following the A-level program. They are also engaging in micro-accredited courses at a higher level than their coursework, particularly for the gifted and talented children, or those who are struggling to meet the A-level standard are using online material in a directed and guided way to consolidate and strengthen understanding of key concepts. And over and above all of that, we're encouraging children to take a taste of other subjects, of other disciplines, of other topics that may not necessarily be part of their, you know, their core program of study, you know, to create this completely personalized approach and actually use, you know, online assessment, you know, and use a much more continuous approach to student assessment to actually allow them to take that optional learning they've done and apply it back into their formal coursework, because at the end of the day, they need to get an exam in order to progress to the next level. I think we'll see this more and more as the global trend. You know, the school will have a certain experience which is teacher directed, and then increasing proportion of the experience will be student directed, you know, with the teacher acting as a facilitator or a guide. Because the problem we've also got is there's too much content out there, and as a parent or a child, I don't know what content is good and what isn't, and I can waste a lot of time looking for it. You know, the teacher acts as a guide and lets the child go on their independent learning journey. The final benefit of that, particularly for older children, is you start to develop university style or workplace style research and thinking skills right from the age of 12 or 13, you know, which leaves you cognitively much better prepared to leave school and enter the adult world.
Thank you, Raza. Cody, bringing you in on the same point. Have you anything to share with us on that?
Yeah, well, you know, a little bit of about what Raz is talking about. You know, kids want to do. You know, we're finding that other, you know, schools are coming to us now and asking, can we have our kids maybe take a couple of courses from you? You know, can they take the AP courses, and can they take some of those higher end courses like what you're saying, Raza? You know, the challenge kids need a little bit more, and they want different opportunities. We're also getting some students that want dual diploma. So, you know, they like the concept of an IB or an IGCSE, but they also want to see if having an American curriculum diploma, you know, helps them in their efforts to get into a university. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of room for again, individualization, and then also partnering, almost, you know, again, supporting in the concept, the Ray Hall project, you know, in terms of, you know, letting kids explore those things and find that avenue that works best for them.
If I could just add to what Cody's saying, so I think it's very important. I think sometimes a false distinction or false dichotomy is set up between the traditional, you know, bricks and mortar, you know, mid to premium level school operators like Al Najjar, and the kind of technology disruptors and the innovators, you know, like Cody, who are running the online model. Look, I think, you know, this is a market that is broad enough and diverse enough and big enough and profitable enough to sustain all these models and to meet in the middle. I think after this coronavirus, we're going to see a certain sector of the community shift much more towards a fully online or a much more comprehensively online model, economic imperatives and others driving them towards that. We're going to see another group, another section of the market actually be driven much more towards, you know, bricks and mortar and more bricks and mortar, because actually they need to be working longer hours and they need their children in a non-home setting, you know, for a longer, you know, period of time. I think in the middle, what we're going to see is flight of parents into the high quality, well-managed schools, particularly those run by the large group with the intellectual property and the resources to embrace these new ideas. And we're going to see a flight of children into a more online or bespoke educational model. Now, nothing changes without some winners and losers. You know, I think we're going to see these trends lead to a reimagination of the market as well. I think market share will increase among the high quality providers, particularly those with a very progressive mindset. You know, you have GEMS and Al-Najah here, who are known within the GCC as being, you know, kind of leaders in innovation and new ideas and personalization. You've got Cody, who's a leader, you know, in the region in online learning. But, you know, these changes don't come without some collateral damage. I think we will see the numbers fall significantly in the kind of average bog standard Me Too international schools. I hope what COVID will do is act as a wake-up call to the education sector as a whole, that we can't stand still, because the consumer will be driven to either more choice and personalization if they have the resources and the motivation to design their own educational program, or if their children don't fit very well, you know, for reasons of special needs, socialization, learning needs, temporary emotional issues that mean that they're better served by a parent managed online virtual school type of a model. We'll see parents whose economic reality means they need to be in a school that gives them a really flexible, you know, and dynamic service. The people who don't evolve to embrace more technology, to give more flexibility to parents, to personalize the learning more around the child, whether it's in the online or the bricks and mortar space, are the ones who will lose market share, because parents got super smart during this lockdown. So one of my two best takeaways from the coronavirus, what I think made the whole world better out of this coronavirus, kids got smarter. I say to every parent, don't worry that your child's formal learning outcomes may not have been realized, because what they got in its place was the ability to do self-directed learning. They learned how to learn in a boot camp of learning that they've never been exposed to before. And you know, the other thing, parents became aware of their own child's development by spending time at them at home doing e-learning. They became aware of their own child's needs. And the wake-up call for our industry is they became aware very acutely of whether the school is meeting those needs or not. Because it's like getting a daily school report. So I feel, you know, the whole industry has been strengthened by this. You know, kids got better at learning, parents got better at understanding what happens in their child's education. You know, this will see you know, the strongest providers really get stronger. And I think that market evolution, you know, has been a huge impetus for, you know, for all of us. And it's a global benefit. You know, who doesn't want a bunch of kids coming back to school after summer smarter with better learning skills than when they left?
Thanks,
Yeah,
Raza.
can I just come in, Ivor, on that one?
Please, mate.
Because I really agree, Raza, in terms of what you've covered there. That's absolutely spot on in terms of an analysis of potentially what might happen. I suppose the other thing that is worth looking at is looking at it more through the parent lens, and actually the duty and responsibility that we have as educators to actually work with our parents on that. So rather than just being responsive to what they demand and what they want, because you as a parent, maybe I as a parent, would still hark back to my school days, and if it was good enough for me, it's good enough for my kids. There's still that mentality that sits out there. So I think we have a duty responsibility to actually put new ideas in front of parents and to show them where other areas of industry have created and done that for the betterment. And so actually there could be other opportunities here within the region for schools to do things very different. Because we have a school market, in order for us to live, breathe, and eat, we need people to pay for the service that we're actually providing as well. I think there's an interesting line there somewhere, Ivor, to explore at some stage around how or what responsibility do we have as educators to actually look to influence parental mindsets around what the art of the possible could actually be.
Well said, Mike. Mark, as a parent and also somebody involved in the education industry, you know you've got both perspectives. What's your view on what was said, and are you optimistic as a parent in relation to?
Yeah, well, I often smile when I listen to Raza, Not only because he says a lot of things that I feel I see on a daily basis are true. So I smile because my kids are definitely smarter than they were. They're smarter than me anyway, but they are. I mean, I've got 4 and they're all in different schools. So I think it's true that I do sort of, I'm the barometer, if you like, for the education here. And I think what's been said by the panel is right. I mean, from a parent's perspective, I think we entered this very concerned on lots of levels. But I think the way that schools have responded and the way that children have responded is absolutely the key to the future. And, you know, I actually think when you asked me earlier about the sort of property and real estate stuff, I mean, what's come out of this is that bricks and mortar and online have to coexist. But they have to coexist in a way that is centered around the child and the relationship with the parents and the school. And so I think that one of the things that we haven't touched today, but I think is worthy of looking at is, you know, this whole sort of extracurriculum piece and sport and what happens with buildings and how buildings are used and how online can get actually involved in all areas of extracurriculum. I mean, how interesting would it be with these really smart kids that we now have, that we get more involved in modern technology in terms of that side of it? I mean, can we start to see gaming, for example, gaming competitions and things like that? Because that's really, you know, we've got to prepare children for the future. And I think that everyone today on the panel has said this is a wake-up call for how we do that.
Thanks, Mark. Just a few questions coming in. I mentioned at the outset that somebody was joining us from the United States in the middle of the night. Glad to say he's awake and conscious because he's asked us a question. George asked, it was announced in the last 24 hours that the Ministry of Education will open the schools on August 30th. What do you think this will look like if the schools do open? Will it be fully open or some hybrid, both physical, online? Cody, can I ask you that one?
Well, we're prepared for anything. You know, we also operate a learning center model here in Knowledge Park. So we actually do have, you know, kids that come every day in a face-to-face manner. So we've got a baked, if you would, blended model school operating already. So you know, I think we're ready for that. You know, you'd have to kind of hear the rumors, and I wouldn't want to speculate one way or the other, but I know that, you know, there are different scenarios that have been thrown out there. I think schools are preparing for all 3 of those scenarios, and so I think that's kind of the good news.
Okay, Raza, would you take the same approach?
Sure, and I can actually give 2 answers. I'll tell you what I think will happen, and I'll tell you what I think should happen. And they may not be the same thing. I think the most probable outcomes, although we again, like most operators, are already on quite a wide range of contingencies. I think in Gulf states in particular, I think we'll see a return to physical presence in school, but with some element of social distancing. Now, the detail of that will very much depend on, I think, what the you know, what the latest data and science is telling us closer to the time. And I think the regulators are right, actually, to you know, to wait to do a bit more analysis before they declare their hand. And so I think what we'll see in September is a more or less return to school, but with an element either of social distancing inside the school premises or a blended curriculum where some time is spent in school and some time spent on remote learning. And that, I think, in our Gulf states is what will be the most probable reality, although we are also prepared for a full return to school with social distancing measures in place. And we are ready to continue with a full distance learning as we have today. But I think what will happen is something in the middle. Now, what I feel should happen, if we look purely at the data, at the science, and at what the learning is telling us so far, and that is we should see a full return to school with strong health and safety measures within the schools. What the science tells us is children are the least likely to catch coronavirus, that if they catch it, they're the least likely to transmit it to others, that the school itself is a very low risk transmission environment because it's predominantly children rather than adults that are in that setting. You know, so actually what the science is increasingly telling us is that children can safely return to school, even if there's no change in the rate of infection within the coronavirus. Now, of course, public policy has to balance what scientists tell us, which is always by its nature unreliable because it's based on a limited data set when it's a new phenomenon, and what would be popular, if you like, with the community. One reason why I'm very confident for my Dubai assets and for my other GCC assets, we've seen a very strongly data-driven, scientifically informed, rational approach here in Dubai. You know, when we knew the least and we felt we were at the most risk, we had a very severe lockdown to kind of stop the clock and take stock of what's going on. As the science started to demonstrate that actually certain environments we thought were risky were not, we started to open them up. We opened up the parks, we opened up the beaches. Malls are not, and shops are not a high risk transmission environment. You know, we opened those. We put certain sensible social distancing measures in place so we could return to economic functioning. So I think the science will dictate that children can return to school. To be on the safe side, there may be some element of social distancing, which, although it may not be scientifically necessary, may be good for parental confidence. And I'm very hopeful that in a policy-driven environment like Dubai, where we don't necessarily have the newspapers and the electorate and, you know, social media driving our decision-making and take a more rational approach, we will see good sense prevail and we'll see children returning to school. I also feel, and I know it's a theme that I seem to be becoming the go-to person on, I feel for my parents because they can't make money, because they can't go to work, you know, and I think unless we can, you know, get the children back into school, a lot of my families will not be able to, you know, to make a living. So if it is safe for children to return to school, and I believe it is, then I'm hoping they'll return to school, and almost all of my customers are on the same page.
Thank you, Raza. Well said. Final question, Mick, if I can put this one to you from Adam. Will structured pathways, foundation programs become even more important in the region, focusing not only on career opportunities for students, but also bolstering their soft skills, e.g. communication, emotional intelligence, pitching ideas, working in agile teams, etc.?
I'll answer that from both the personal and the GEMS perspective, and both are very, very similar. I mean, for me, I think it's absolutely crucial that people have something that is hyper-personal, especially at the older end, and I'll focus on that end to begin with. I think the pathways that can be created should be created. You know, I know we touched on this earlier on, but you know, you look at some of the major companies in the world who are now saying quite openly that they no longer require people with degrees, but what they're looking for are ranges of experience that they've actually been able to compile. And then, you know, our view is if we're preparing children for a world of the future, we should educate them accordingly. And that means more of a focus in terms of some of the social and emotional skills that we think are going to be absolutely paramount around here, around understanding yourself, having empathy, being agile, understanding different situations, being resilient, all of those things, which are quite different from the normal sort of 4 C's of sort of collaboration and creative thinking, etc., critical thinking, etc. So for me, I think that they should a higher profile than they currently do. At the moment, it tends to be academic programs supported by skills. I think there's a place for them either to be equal or in some instances more of the experience and less about the academic qualification that I think will begin to be more important. And I think that's not just for the UAE, I think that's something that's international. I certainly would hope to see that there would be a move towards that That's me and my sort of personal agenda around, come on, we need to innovate the system, guys. Can we actually do this? I hope we can, by those types of innovations and alternative pathways and credentials that could be created.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you to our panel. We're out of time. It's been great talking to you, and thank you for your time today. And thank you to our audience. We have another webinar next week on digital transformation in K-12, and we hope you can join us then. That's Tuesday next week. But did you want to say good luck, stay safe, and stay well, and thank you again to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivor. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.